Today, I'm here with the founders of MILO, Katrina and Lisa. I have a huge brand crush on them. I love how they see the beauty industry, what they think of the beauty industry, and how they see beauty as an intuitive and internal thing. So I'm going to hand this over to Lisa and Katrina to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about how and why you started your brand.
Yeah, thank you so much, Renee. It's so good to be here. And I mean, it's funny, when we first met, I definitely had a brand crush on you as well, just hearing the way that you spoke about reclaiming our power from the beauty industry, from self-care and from wellness. And these industries have become really big players in the world of consumption. And with that comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of power. And I think, part of really what I love about starting a beauty brand is that we get to take that responsibility and do with it, what we hope to also be able to see in the world. And so a little bit about me, I was never in the beauty industry. So I've actually been in a corporate culture, leadership consulting and design, and more regenerative business practices and models of design. And so my personal relationship to my own skin health and the mental health aspect that relates to that has been a very personal one. And creating eventually a multifunctional product was really born out of a lot of different intersections and things merging, which we'll chat more a little bit later. But it was a recognition of a lot of products are actually just labels, and I'm making all these products for different skin concerns, and I'm realizing that there's actually a lot of multifunctionality in products themselves. So it was kind of a process of discovery, and in my kitchen of sort of mixing a bunch of concoctions for all my friends and myself, until eventually I was like, aha. But yeah, so now I kind of get to blend the two, but I'm still super passionate about the regenerative piece and the leadership piece, which is really also core to our mission.
I can picture you with little goggles and your scientist mitts and a Bunsen burner.
Yeah. My mom was not so happy when I was doing it in the household, living with her. And one time I got her into it and made the mistake of bringing candles into it, which she thought was going to be so fun. And there's still candle wax, like 15 years later. Oh, the counter.
And Lisa, what about you?
Yeah, so I am also not directly from the beauty industry, but beauty adjacent, doing corporate innovation for some of the bigger CPGs like P&G, L'Oreal, Unilever, other companies like that. And in addition, I was an absolute beauty addict. Like, give me, 10 steps, $700, which are like real numbers that we did math after the fact. I was like all about skincare and like, what else can I try? And like, what's the most luxurious thing and whatever. And I was also traveling a lot for my job at the time, doing that kind of work. And Katrina called me and she said, listen, like, I've been thinking about this, basically everything she just described. And immediately I was like 100% in. If you can do that, if you can take these 10 products that I'm using and like all of this money that I'm spending and consolidate it into 3 things that still meet my standards, because they were really, really high, and they still are. Our standards are equally high. I was like, I'll switch immediately. Like, I don't need to be doing this. I just do it because I feel like I need to be doing it. And so that was sort of like the moment of, yes, all in, let's do that. And then also just sort of drawing on the experience I had trying to innovate within these legacy CPGs and seeing that they're not really designed for it, kind of helped me quickly form this vision of what we're trying to build now, which is this sort of like human care regenerative model, where we can be a company that's selling products from a different place of not extraction, but regeneration.
Can you talk more about that? I'm fascinated with this idea of this human care regeneration.
Yeah, I'll jump in to the regeneration piece. So I think words are so important, right? And we have our own definitions of words. I think at the core and root of regeneration is to work with and to renew, working with cycles. So even to think about like the opposite of that, right? Being extraction, to be taking with, no real thought of like, how is this going to reproduce, renew, working against nature. And so that goes for our mindsets, it goes for our relationships, like it goes for so many aspects of life. And so I always come back to this idea of like regenerative mindset of how are we thinking more regeneratively? And to me, that's recognizing the interconnectivity of absolutely every part of human life, of, how we operate as individuals, how we operate within communities, within businesses, and then ultimately the role of all of those things within the entire planet. So, from a practical sense, that means thinking of all the parts of the supply chain and how we're working to renew and support the potential of each of those aspects, right? It is working with product development so that we're creating products that are working to support the skin's potential and support that process to function effectively and at its best. And so, it's also creating the environments for the whole, whether it's a human, a community, or an organization, to really optimize its potential. And if we just think about that, like, that's so different from how most businesses operate. So, regeneration for us is infused to every single aspect, that both as an individual showing up in the world, but also as a business, and asking those questions like, is this regenerative? How can we constantly work with being more regenerative and working that direction? Because it's not always going to be perfect, right? Like, nothing's ever really going to be 100% regenerative. The goal is to be continuously pushing to be able to use that as your standard and to just evolve and do better. So the willingness to evolve everything, evolve every process, every mindset, every belief, every part of what we may have thought to be true last year might not be true to us this year, right? So being willing to push our own thinking on things. And that's been a constant process for us in building this business as well. And kind of that's the intersection of human care. One thing I'll add to that is, especially in the world of conscious sort of leadership and building conscious businesses, like, that is a movement that maybe some people have heard of. The regeneration is, like, I would say, going even one step further than that, because consciousness is one aspect of the whole, and being more consciously aware and operating in that way. Regenerative is more about also that and working with. And the way that we view capitalism or consumerism, or we see it as very extractive. And that's only because of the way that we've seen it operate. It's not because that's the way that it has to be. A big part of renewal and regeneration is that things that are no longer serving are dropping. So things that may have served in the past to get us to where we are in terms of capitalism may not actually be serving us anymore. And I would say that they're definitely not. And so that's sort of where this idea of regenerative capitalism comes in, and taking that further. Lisa, if you want to jump in and even share more of human care and what that means to us and how it ties everything together, really.
For sure. So as Katrina described already, regeneration is like a much bigger concept than just like one aspect. But the thing I personally get really excited about, like from a business perspective, just kind of having that background, is this idea of regenerative capitalism, because I think that we're at a point in kind of society, like if we just limit it to like North American society for the sake of not generalizing, there's so many things that are at a breaking point right now. I think that there's a lot of people in the world who are really afraid, genuinely and materially afraid, for what their life looks like tomorrow because of, politics and other things. And it's really disempowering to be continually engaged in this discussion of left versus right, where right represents capitalism and left represents socialism. Because the truth is, we're stuck in a capitalist model. This is late stage capitalism. All of the structures around us are built upon that. So what if we accept that as a fact, but look at it from a regenerative perspective and flip and say, okay, well, if a traditional company is built on a capitalist model, the vast majority of them, almost all of them, are built on an extractive capitalist model. How can I get my costs the lowest? How can I get my price the highest? How can I get as many customers as humanly possible? How can I change my marketing to manipulate people into buying as much as they possibly can? And then when you look at companies, like public companies, right? As soon as you go public, you're obligated to one thing and one thing only legally, which is shareholder value. And the way that companies tend to do that is by cutting costs, stripping things down, reducing quality. And there's an inherent lack of respect, I think, for the consumer in that. And so what we're trying to do is say, okay, fine, like capitalism, like we accept your model, but we're going to flip it. And we're going to make sure that a percentage of all of our top line revenue for as long as we're in existence is going to regenerative causes. We're going to make sure that the products we're formulating are from a place of need and not from a desire to sell. Just different things like that I think will position us to be sort of like a closed model of regenerative capitalism that we really, really hope other people will be inspired by. And we hope that takes us in a slightly different direction than this sort of stalemate that we're in right now politically.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The sort of testing the boundaries of where we could go with this, and the whole like this holistic idea of taking regeneration as, not only like at your cellular level, but at, your community and economic situations as well. And how can we turn everything into, well, like you said, upside down, flip it so that it's not about like take, but what can I give? How can I make it better? Here I am definitely is very keen on that concept of a regenerative economy. So the more we can work with businesses like yours and your business thrives, our business thrives, the people that purchase from us thrive because they're buying products that are good for them and good for the planet. So it works in circles, right? Instead of in lines and charts.
And I think that it's really easy as a consumer to feel overwhelmed and like there aren't so many options, but there are great companies out there trying it. Companies like yours, companies like ours. And I remember on our, like the last call that we had saying, wait, like you guys are a human care business too. That's not something that we wish to really own outright. It's a concept that we want to bring to the world, a different model.
Like a cooperative of human care businesses.
And using that as an opportunity to create that recognition for, because we're all producers, we're all consumers, right? So making it a little bit easier also to recognize, oh, this is actually where I can vote with my energy, my dollars, and my attention, and make a difference in the world just purely through the things that I'm already doing, you know? And through the things that I already maybe need to purchase, and challenging some of those things too, right? Using business as a way to challenge some of the narratives around overconsumption and the constant desire for more. So rather than using marketing as a means to fuel overconsumption, using messaging as a way to fuel community care. And so just flipping the model, I think, on so many different things, but using what works and, you know, what has worked in the past that is not actually causing harm.
Yeah.
And it's building on the, you know, like whatever, we never used to recycle. And then recycling became, there's a growing awareness of the importance of it. But now we're moving beyond that. It's not just recycling, it's reusing. And so building an awareness of these concepts that not that people are resistant to necessarily, but they just hadn't thought about it before. And so how much can we communicate that so that it
recycling is a great point too, because it's, you know, we view recycling or waste as, okay, great, like I can recycle this or I can waste this or maybe I can reuse this, but even having a deeper connection to those aspects, right? Somebody's waste is something that could actually create something new. When we start to think about circular as well, like composting, for example, is just an example. It's like, yeah, that is waste, but you can actually use that to, and you don't need to like go buy all this soil. Like there's just like these different components that are already there. We just need to tap into it more and move deeper into that and more towards that versus further away from it.
And one thing I just want to add to that is sort of like within our sort of human care model, taking some of the mental load and the onus actually off the customer and back onto the corporation where we think it belongs. Because sure, you can recycle and you can compost and you can, you know, take your mason jars to the refill station and whatever. But that doesn't change the fact that the vast majority of fossil fuels come from like a certain amount of like top producers. There's like private jets to worry about more than individuals taking like one commercial flight a year. And I think that corporations tend to really succeed at skirting a lot of responsibility and greenwashing whatever efforts they are making, and then putting the rest on the customer to figure it out or feel like they're the ones who have to lift us all up and solve some of these problems. Part of the human care model is baking in of value or like value creation to have like positive ripple effect without the consumer having to do anything but, in our case, just buy skincare because they're busy and they've got lives and other stuff going on. It's one little step that they can take to help solve the world's problems without feeling like they need to be perfect conscious consumers all the time.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I view our world right now as one where everybody's on the brink of burnout, and to ask them to do one more thing is sometimes just that straw that breaks the camel's back. And it's really, I think we all can contribute, but I think the onus should be on the producers to make sure that we're good custodians first.
Yeah, exactly. I think it should be proportional to the kind of like impact you have environmentally, socially, whatever, right? Like everybody does have an individual responsibility, but the greater your ripple of impact, I think the greater responsibility you have to make sure that that's a positive impact.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the products and how they sort of represent this human care revolution?
Yeah. Well, I mean, So I would say just to start, there's a few components. So one, when we think about, again, the business, it being the business's responsibility to not continue to fuel overconsumption or misinformation or narratives that are just sort of driving more and, self-reliance on something outside of yourself to feel good about yourself and false ideals. And so that shows up, I think, in many ways. From a product development standpoint, it is, being true to skin health and what your skin really needs to be cared for and to be healthy versus driving more products, which actually can cause a lot of damage to your skin. So coming back to the principles of skin health, focusing on moisture, hydration, antioxidants, essential nutrients, cell turnover, and that doesn't also need to come from 6 different products to do each of those things. Really getting back to also the fundamentals of what we already know to be true in terms of plants and plant usage and skincare, nature, and things like that. I feel like I went on a tangent there, and I don't even know if I answered the question, but I'm sure Lisa has more to add as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard in there like a question more about like the products themselves, which I would love to answer, but Trina, please jump in. It's a set of 3 products designed to work individually and together and cover the 6 fundamentals of skin health. So Katrina already listed them, but you don't need multiple products for that. It can be consolidated. That was Katrina's original sort of like R&D aha moment. So we've got our everything oil, we've got our hydrating tonic, and then our activating powder. And those 3 cover like 20 different commonly used like personal care products. So you don't have to use more than this if you don't want to.
And I can jump into a texture component, right? Like that was a really big part of our early development conversation. So I started realizing like I was using oil on my hair, on my face. I started realizing like this is even like before oil cleansing. I mean, oil cleansing has been around for so long. It was before it was really a big thing. I didn't actually know about oil cleansing, but I realized, oh wait, I can remove my makeup with oil. And so there are all these benefits I saw to oil because it like extracts, right? Like oil pulls oil, it leaves what you want on there, and also nourishes your hair and really provides these nutrients to your skin and your hair. Whereas things like tonics and toners, they were more balancing. They were more, depending on the one that I was making or using at that time, they would more hydrate or more like actually like maybe dry out. There were different value to different products. And then powder, which I was using powder as dry shampoo, but powder also, as a powdered cleanser to like extract more, to actually be able to act as a treatment where you can sit it and leave it on your skin. And I would be putting it all over my body. Like there were just so many uses. And I was like, so much of it comes down to texture because it's like allowing you to use products in a different way and different consistency. And so that was a really important factor in developing something multifunctional, because then it's no longer, okay, I need different products with different ingredients. It's, okay, great, this product can have all of those ingredients. Now how I use it is going to change what it does for me and what the experience is. Because if I use oil as a makeup remover, it's going to be pulling out what's no longer meant to be there, keeping what's meant to be there, nourishing my skin. But I'm not going to maybe get the depth of the essential nutrients because I'm not leaving it on my skin. I'm still washing it off. So that's just like a simple example of even just how you use a product is going to impact how it supports your skin and how it's supporting you within the thing that you're looking for it to do. Another key component is when we were growing up, there was so much about strip your skin and then replenish it. We still see that today, but it's actually really bad for your skin and it's not necessary. So a lot of people think, oh, I need to strip my skin. I don't want to feel the oils anymore. And then I'm going to put back on what I want to be there. But that strips your skin of it's the same thing with like antibiotics, right? It's like when you take antibiotics, it's also killing the good bacteria and then your immune system's low. It's very similar with your skin. Your skin's your largest organ. So you're removing it of all the things that your skin's actually working hard to be there. And then your skin's just going to work harder to reproduce that oil, reproduce the good bacterias. And then you're replenishing it with a bunch of foreign things. And so that concept has been debunked. And that was another piece of it. It's like, we don't need stuff to strip and then replenish. We need stuff to actually just nourish, protect, and support the actual development of your skin.
And sometimes that what we're using to replenish has toxic ingredients. Like,
oh my gosh, 100%. There's like Katrina mentions this idea of like stripping to replenish. There's this like myth of that clean feeling almost, it's the same thing as like when, cleaning products, that clean smell, that's invented. That is something that is constructed to make us feel a certain way, regardless of whether that feeling is like actually true
or good for us.
Exactly. The example that we like really used a lot early on, talking about like beauty myths and how that relates to like what companies will sell and whatever, like the 3-step routine. Our product is 3 products. Our kit is 3 products, but it's not really like a 3-step routine in the sense that, like, if you look at Clinique, right, you have to wash, strip, then you like add like a water product that feels like it's delivering hydration, but actually it's incredibly drying. And then you put on like a moisturizer that's not even like really super effective at doing that. And then you get stuck in the loop of like, well, I did these 2 steps, so I need the moisturizer. And then you just become really dependent on a dysfunctional system.
So one question I like to ask everybody that I interview is, how do you think about self-care and what do you do to care for yourself?
I mean, so self-care in general for me, especially now, is like a lot more of a spiritual concept. It doesn't involve so much of like whatever, like processes of, I don't know, treatments I do to myself and whatever. It's more about like a lot of baths, a lot of like sound healing, like meditation, different things like that. And then a really simplified like care routine, just because I've completely lost whatever ambition I used to have that was getting me to buy and use like 10 steps every single day, twice a day. Like I can't even imagine doing that anymore. So like my routine now, like in that way, is I use the MILO everything oil to cleanse. Then I spray the tonic and then I put the everything oil back on. If I am going to wear makeup, which I wear way, way less of now that I'm like not really in corporate environments anymore, I'll use the powder to set my makeup. And then as like a certified like non-hair washer, like I'm really lazy and don't like to wash my hair that much. So I use the activating powder as a dry shampoo constantly, because it's like it just does your hair for you. Like it absorbs the oil and then it kind of like fluffs it up and whatever. I spray the ends with the tonic and then that's it. That's like my whole thing. Sometimes I'll use the powder as a like a powder cleanser, just like for a little bit of extra exfoliation, and sometimes I'll do the mask, but honestly I'm pretty minimal these days.
I was just thinking it'd be so fun to do like a before and after of our routines. Yeah, so I mean, from a really simple perspective, like just like the daily foundations is usually washing. I actually don't wash my face in the morning anymore, which I used to really do, but as long as I'm cleansing really properly at night. So I do use the oil to remove makeup, to cleanse my skin. Sometimes I use the powder, but usually I reserve the powder for a treatment. So I love to do a weekly mask in the bath, or I'll get my husband to join me. He loves when I suggest it because he knows he's going to get like a face massage. So I love to do a weekly mask and make it also a part of shared care or like a moment of connection, whether with myself or with my husband. And then, anything on top of that covers my foundations. And then something I've been really thinking about a lot lately is there are times where I feel like I either want to do more or less or whatever it is because I'm not feeling good about my skin. That's always going to happen, right? Inevitably, there's going to be moments. And so one thing I really loved about starting to use MILO is that I got into a very consistent routine with my skin and it felt really good and consistent. And I wasn't having the same level of irritation or breakouts or whatever I was having. And then there's moments where that changes, right? Once a month it happens in a certain time of my cycle. So I've realized, okay, it's fine. That's going to pass. But there's also, I'm getting older. And so there are moments where I see, I have this one wrinkle in the center of my forehead. I've honestly had it since like high school. I think it's from, I'm very expressive or like squint a lot, like watching TV. And it just like, it's always been there. It is one of my biggest insecurities. And so, really diving into why is my initial reaction to, I'll just go, okay, I'm just going to get Botox and fix this because I'm so frustrated, So I've really been saying, okay, what can I look at in my routine naturally and tune into what I really need, what's going to support that. And so one big thing is hydration. Like that is a part of my routine, like making sure I'm getting more hydration, making sure I'm getting the proper electrolytes. Another aspect is, making sure that the products are really soaking in and having time to absorb. So I've actually started doing where I put MILO on, but then I put like a silicone sheet on my forehead, which reminds me to relax and it's triggering the muscles. and I'm like allowing them to absorb more. And sometimes I'll throw in other things like a really deeply hydrating mask once a month. And I've already noticed a difference. So it's like now I don't wake up and am reminded like I hate this thing in my face. I'm too expressive, And I think that part is really important because we talk about intuitive self-care a lot, and having these 3 products with MILO, knowing that you can use it so many different ways is like being intuitive with, okay, what does my skin need today? How am I using it? And if I feel myself wanting to go towards some ideal or having these judgments about aging, what can I do to support my skin so that it can be its best? And then how do I feel, once I've done that? And I find that it does look a lot better. And I'm already feeling a lot better because of that. And I'm so happy that I didn't just book a Botox appointment, because that was literally the point I was at. And it's fine to get Botox. I'm also not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but there is like an immediate need to fix it sometimes, or fix things. And I think we just also reminding ourselves to slow down and practice slowness so that we can discern. I think discernment is a really big thing of, what do I need right now? What can I do? And a lot of the times it's literally just like resting. I have a heated mat I'll rest on. I have a lot of I really love these little tools and things. So I have like a self-care mat. I have an infrared light. So I have my own little area in the house that I set up with the things that allow me to just really explore with what I need in that moment. And the ritual just becomes the space. Like, it becomes putting the time aside for the space. And whether it's music or doing something vocally with my own voice, it's always something different that comes up that I need. And so not being so rigid with it, but intuitive care.
Y'all hit on some of my favorite themes of just simplifying your routines, making space, right? Giving yourself some time and some space to just take care of yourself. And then that whole thought of intuitively, am I listening to these outside voices that are saying, oh, that line is ugly? Or am I really thinking about, well, what's important to me and what's beautiful in terms of, me holistically, not lines on my face.
Sure. I think, none of us are above insecurities, right? We all have them. And I think that the wonderful movements of body positivity and beauty positivity sometimes can turn into this sense of toxic positivity where you're supposed to love yourself 100% of the time, no matter what. And you can't say if you don't. And you can't say what you might want to do because you do have a certain insecurity. We're all self-determined individuals, and we all have different reasons for the insecurities that we have. Whatever it is, that discernment that Katrina's talking about, giving yourself permission to say, you know what, I don't love this about myself and I would feel better if I did XYZ. There's no shame in that at all. But you have to make sure that you're having a conversation with yourself about it instead of just constantly receiving messages and acting on them, because that's what we've been conditioned to do in the extractive paradigm that we live in.
And that's important because there also is, and I've seen this in myself too, there's this reaction where we want to almost push back and be like, well, no, I'm doing it for me because I want to do it. And sometimes that might be true. I'm not saying that it's not, but I can say that for myself, I have noticed that a lot of times what's underneath that is, no, I'm still doing it for somebody else or for, to be more accepted or fit in society or whatever it is. So even just being willing to be vulnerable with yourself and honest with yourself so that you can be more honest and vulnerable with others even. And I think that ripple effect, when you do that and when you show up in that way, you invite other people to show up that way and to meet you with that same level of vulnerability, because I guarantee you that underneath a lot of the things that we do, that we are kind of, I feel like I'm just doing this to look better because I don't maybe feel good about that about myself. There's so much good stuff underneath that to unpack that can really just be so freeing and just feel so good. And yeah, there's so much beauty to that. And so I invite that process.
And it can be hard. I mean, I think it does take, again, that time and attention of pulling that apart. What's just for me because I, want this for me, and what's, those outside influences that we receive from the day we're born. Yeah. Maybe before. That, they're not.
It's not
really
just in beauty,
important.
it's every area, every area. Yeah.
I think the vast majority of men, I mean, they're subject to a lot of other types of toxic messaging, but the beauty industry just completely misses them somehow, to the point where they're entirely ignorant to all of the messages that we receive, like you said, Renee, from the day that we're born. I can't even imagine what it would be like to not have been bombarded, especially like we grew up in like the early 2000s, right? Born in the 90s, but growing up, like as soon as you're hitting that age, right? It was like the early 2000s, like tabloids, and like it was okay to comment on people's bodies, like in a media interview, and just all of that kind of stuff. We grew up with that as the norm. We grew up with being inundated with messages of like, you have to buy this if you want to look in a way that's going to demonstrate that like you have value in society and whatever. And I think it's interesting that it's so gendered in terms of like women are constantly subject to that messaging, and then men aren't really.
So last question, briefly, tell me a little bit about what your future for MILO looks like. What's your kind of vision?
I mean, in the long run, so the goal is to be a vertically integrated house of brands. So in the same way that today we have like L'Oreal or P&G or Unilever doing hundreds of billions of dollars in an extractive model, being able to create something of that scale built on a regenerative model, like we will, but keeping in mind our commitment of top line revenue, like 3% of top line revenue forever at the holding company level, that's a really significant amount of impact that we have the potential to make. And that I think is what drives us forward.